I would like to bring out my friend Gurm. He's probably one of my best friends. I photographed his wedding. I photographed his sister's wedding. And I'm like family over there when I go over there. And so he's a great friend. But I really respect him because he, he did that very hard thing that a lot of us do when we want to transition ourselves into, we've got a nice, very nice paying job. Do I want to sacrifice that to do wedding photography? So we're going to hear a little bit about his story and how he's able to find a niche in the market too. So why don't you give a big round of hand to Gurm? Come on out. What's up, brother? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, Gurm, so tell me, how did you kind of get started with this whole busy, crazy wedding business?
Well, growing up as a kid, I was always playing with my dad's SLR, and I was also interested in film. So I always had one camera in each hand, and I tried to document like anything and everything I could. And I guess I was looking for like a story to tell. And I used to capture family events, and I did landscape and things like that. And I got sick of that pretty quickly, and it was pretty dry. And then friends and family told me, you should maybe start doing weddings. And this is when I was in school. And
how old were you at that?
This was about 2005-ish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2006. And so I started doing a few weddings on the side. And I just put together a really crappy website. It was nothing special. And I got a handful of weddings. And I was also interested in film, so I took a film lighting course. And that helped me with the basics of lighting and just the natural concepts that you should know. And as time went on, I booked a few more weddings, and about 2007, I think, is when I started stalking you on your blog.
He was a stalker.
And I think I reached out to you, and I asked you when you were teaching in my area, and I went to your workshop in Victoria. And I remember,
Canada, that is.
Yes, Canada. And I remember that first workshop is 4 days long, and every day I was just like overwhelmed with the amount of information that I was getting. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with all this? And that following year, I went to every single workshop that Scott had, and at each workshop, I was able to concentrate on something that I needed help with, lighting, posing, the business side of things. So I had like a year of intensive training, and that's pretty much, that gave me the skill set to bring me where I am today.
Okay, so that's great. So you developed the content, or you had the skill, and you invested a lot into, okay, I did a world tour, was it 2010?
2009.
2009? How many places? We went to 7, we were in Vegas, we were in China, we were in Italy,
Japan,
and he went to all of them. So he just committed to it. And every time he went, you didn't try to learn everything, but you just concentrated on one.
Yeah, it's impossible to learn everything.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah, you learn that pretty quickly.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So how did it reach the point where, and you had a nice job at that time, right? A good paying job. What was that, how did you make that decision to transition over, and how did you actually make it work financially for you?
It was a few things. I was getting busier. I was getting to a point where if I didn't make a change, and it was already starting to happen, where my couples were getting a little bit impatient because I was taking so long.
Oh, okay.
It's impossible to edit weddings and work 40 hours a week. You don't have the energy. So that was a factor. And I knew I couldn't progress any further if I didn't give up my day job. I couldn't invest any more into my photography. And I also I wanted the blessing of my family and my parents and things like that as well. That was important. So they were all behind me. And I think I took the leap around 2009. And I remember that following year, I had about 12 weddings booked.
Good.
Yeah.
So you had 12 weddings, that landmark, you had that 12. And I think that is the key thing for everybody, is that it won't be a natural progression. You literally have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody has to jump off the high dive at some point.
Yeah.
And you made that switch, which was great, and I'm like so proud of you. And I think he said another important thing that's important with a lot of the Asian culture, which I can relate to, is that you want that blessing with your parents, right? And I think you're fortunate, and I'm fortunate that, and I love your parents, that they are just so supportive but sometimes
Yeah.
they're not.
It was a sweet balancing act of asking their permission and telling them that I'm doing it. That's
He
what
was
it
going anyway,
I was
right?
going to do it. My mind was already made.
Yeah,
I'm like,
he was
out of
going
respect.
anyway, but he wanted that blessing, but he wasn't going he was going anyway. That's just like marrying the person that your parents don't like, whatever, right? It's the same. Oh, that's a good analogy. Sometimes it's like that. You know, if you love the person, and even though your parents may not like her and disapprove her at this time, sometimes you just have to go with love, right? And that's what you did. You were just in love with your passion. And so how did you develop your market? How did you gain traction in the marketplace? What did you focus on?
What happened was after I got the lighting and posing skills from you, the first few weddings I did that were Indian weddings, I was looking at what else was out there. And to me, personally, it was just really over-processed work. And I'm like, that's fine, that's great, people want that. But I'm like, I want to do something different. So I decided to really just tone it down. And my philosophy became, after I got skills from Scott, to introduce art and glamour into the Indian weddings that I was photographing. And I wanted the bride to look beautiful, but not too posy. I wanted the post-processing to be there, but I didn't want it to be over the top. Mm-hmm. And it was something a little bit different that people hadn't seen before. So that really got a lot of word of mouth. And from the few weddings I had at the beginning, I think 90% of my couples now are Indian couples.
Great. So there it is. You've kind of went to the community that was familiar with you. They had trust with you. And then you added something to that niche market,
exactly.
Right? So you looked at it and go, oh, I see all these weddings out there, Indian weddings, but the glamour was missing in it?
Yeah, not all of them, but some of them. I'm like, I can add something to this that's not already there.
And then big success for you.
Yeah.
Went forward. Now, what about that person who's considering getting into Indian weddings?
Yeah.
Well, can you give them some advice, of getting into this market?
I think it's a few things. One is I think it's really important to understand the traditions. Indian weddings are really long. They're usually about 5 days long. There's like a week of festivities. And you have to understand that each of those festivities is as important as the wedding and the reception. So if you can go in and not know too much and shoot it mechanically, and I'm sure you'll do fine, but I think if you have an understanding of the traditions and the history a little bit, that would really help capturing those events.
Great. And so I hear that you're actually kind of coming out with a book, right?
Yes, I'm working. It's a work in progress, but it's coming soon.
I told him to have it ready before her CreativeLive, and I guess that wasn't going to happen. But it's in the process. But people can contact you, right? If they're interested, if you can consult and so forth, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's amazing. And I think you brought up an important point, is that if you're going to dominate a niche, you have to really know it.
Exactly. Yeah.
The intricacies of it like no other. So if somebody else coming in, they're not going to photograph it the same way you are, because you know exactly what that client wants and what they're looking for, because you do know all the traditions and all that kind of stuff.
And with Indian weddings, you also need to satisfy the couple and you need to satisfy the parents. It's two different things. So they're usually on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
That's key.
Yeah, and they're the ones usually paying the bills. So I always kind of cater to them, and if they're happy, then I can work with the couple. That's not a problem.
See, that's the Western point of thinking is a little bit different, right? Because we don't really consider that a lot of times, right? And so you have to. That's an integral part of their culture, so you have to understand that process.
Exactly, yeah.
So I would imagine, well, we'll have time to get into it later, but the closing process on that is a little bit different.
It's a lot longer. You have more than one consult, exactly.
Right.
So it'll be probably 3 or 4 consults usually, and more people show up at each one.
You know what's great about having, and this is what happens when I'm doing your wedding and I'm doing your sister's wedding, is like you get to spend a lot of time with your clients and really build a great relationship. So at the end of the week, it's like amazing. You feel like family.
Exactly. You don't want to leave.
That's why I feel like family when I go up to your place and everything. So that's great. Let's open it. Is there any kind of questions or anything that you might have for Gurm, or about him developing his niche or anything like that?
Let's start with our in-studio audience, and if not, we'll head to the internet. I'm sure this is going to be asked. How do you even start with a 5-day wedding? Like charging wise, do you take on less per year?
I limit myself to around, I did 25 last year and it was just too much. 20 is good. And usually the package includes the wedding and the reception, which is usually a Saturday and a Sunday. Everything else is hourly. And you just have to determine what you can charge hourly. I think the market ranges anywhere from 75 to 250 an hour for Indian weddings.
So just an example, what's the average, not like necessarily your price, but in average, what is people expecting to pay, your client expecting to pay for an Indian wedding?
Probably around 6,000.
6,000 is about the average?
Yeah, with an album.
With an album, okay,
Yeah.
great, good to know. All right, anything else?
We are a question. Oh, here we go. Question from Wackadoodle, which is one of the great names in there. Wackadoodle. If you were starting over, what might you do differently?
Ooh, that's a good question. When I first started, I was focusing all on photography, like 100% of my energy was going towards that. And I'm a pretty quiet and reserved guy, so I'd probably spend a little bit more energy on just working with people and developing a rapport quicker. That was kind of one of my weaknesses at the beginning, and it took me a lot longer to get over that than I would liked.
Cool.
One Sharp Joe would like to know how you keep your beard so neatly trimmed.
It's 1 hour a morning, that's what it is.
Oh, Joe. Cindy Mack, do you work alone?
No, I have a few assistants, probably around 2 for each wedding, because sometimes events happen simultaneously during the week and I can't be everywhere at once. So I usually have 1 or 2 second shooters at each wedding.
Cool. And let's take a look at Glimmer. I have a really hard time hiring my prices when it comes to original clients. They think that since they got the lower prices once, they will always get it. Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
You mean that's like moving up?
Yeah.
Right? That's going to happen.
Okay.
You're going to lose it. And so my philosophy is when you raise your rates, you're breaking into a new kind of social class, if you will. You need to establish 12 weddings in that new social class before you get that rave again. So sometimes when you raise your rates and you get into a new social class, you're going to go back a little bit because you're leaving behind that. But you have to leave behind something in order to get something greater. And I'll be talking about that in the next lecture.
All right, well, we have Sabrina, who is from Jezza, and Sabrina has also, we've had her on, or she's been with us.
Yes.
And one of your close friends as
Yeah.
well. And so Sabrina's question is, for Gurm, what is the biggest lesson that you learned from Scott's World Tour?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's more than one. I didn't know anything about lighting or posing when I went in. I knew very little. So it was lighting, posing. It was bringing myself into my photography. I think that 3 biggest things. I can't limit that to one thing though.
And then the last hurdle, which I'm kind of mentoring him with now, is kind of like bringing out your personality.
Exactly.
I mean, he's got a great personality, but just coming a little bit forward and showing it a little bit more. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great.
Gurm, this is from Hagen in KC. Do you have any advice to non-Indians for how to get their first Indian wedding or booking them?
It's a bit tricky because I know that they would like to see some work with an Indian wedding because they want to make sure that you understand all the traditions and the festivities. I would recommend maybe second shooting for somebody that does Indian weddings, so they can at least share some images and show that they know the wedding.
Great.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions that are starting to come in on Indian weddings specifically.
One more day, extended.
I know. We actually haven't had a Indian wedding photography workshop here on CreativeLive, and I think that we really should. So if you guys know anybody who is an instructor, an educator who could teach that class well, let us know.
Gurm's gonna do it.
All right.
He loves to, he has a passion to teach though.
Oh, that's fantastic. We'll talk afterwards.
Eventually.
But we do have a survey. I think it's creativelive.com/survey. Suggest. I knew it started with an S. Thank you.
Yeah. So creativelive.com/suggest.
Awesome. Do you have any final questions for Gurm? Anyone in the studio? Yes, Krista.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you please both the parents and the bride and the groom? Because I've run into that before.
Yeah.
I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
I have the luxury a little bit of spending more time with the parents because of the pre-wedding event, so I try to figure out what's most important to them. It's usually like out-of-town guests and family that they really care about, so I try to figure out who they are the days leading up to the wedding. And then I just go crazy with my telephoto lens and just shoot a lot of candid photos of them. And that goes a long way. I get more compliments on those photos sometimes than the ones I spend hours editing. So, yeah.
That's a good, I would have never thought of that. So that's great. That's why I don't get hired to do weddings, I guess.
All right, well, fantastic. We really, really appreciate you coming on and hearing what your experience has been. Where can everybody find you?
Website is sohalphotography.com, and then Facebook, I think it's just Facebook, and then Gurm Sohal.
Spell that out for people.
Gurmsohal.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, please help me in giving Gurm a big round of applause.